What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Learning Quick. Super excited to have my friend of many years now, looking back, Maria from Microsoft, here to join us. And she's going to walk me through testing out some of the latest ability to write API endpoints with .NET. This is completely new for me. I haven't touched .NET in like 5 years or something. So it will be a very interesting experience. It should be a lot of fun. But Maria, welcome to the stream.
Thank you so much, James. It's just so nice to see you. It's just that I see, it's been, what, 7 years? No, more than that. 8 years.
When we met. We were talking about this beforehand. Met back in Atlanta at a big like kickoff conference at Microsoft. Yeah.
Yeah, and we were the two youngest people on the team, the two newbies, and now I'm like an old person here apparently. But yeah.
It's weird when you can't claim the young card anymore. Like, I feel like I was so proud of being like young on a team of people with a lot more experience. But now I'm more of the experienced person.
People look at you for you must know this, and you're just like, I don't. And then there's that imposter syndrome of growing into your status in quotes, right? Yeah.
It's still, especially for people who are new in tech, imposter syndrome is a big deal. But just know it doesn't go away. Like it changes a little bit, but there still is imposter syndrome wherever you go, honestly.
I have it every day.
Yep. Maria, do you want to tell us a little bit about your background, and then more specifically about your role, and then lastly, what do you want to? I'm just going to follow your lead, so you tell me what you want us to take a look at today.
Absolutely. So my name is Maria Naggaga. I am a now principal program manager at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for 9 years. I can't believe that happened, but it did. And James and I started on the same team I joined in late 2012. He joined in 2013, where we were both evangelists. We really focused on students and startups. It was a fun time to get people excited about our product. And then 4 years after that, I joined DevDiv, the developer division at Microsoft, where my main task was how do we make .NET more approachable, more appealing to people who exist outside our ecosystem. So I have made a number of things while I'm on this team. If you go to docs.microsoft.com and you see C# code running in the browser, that was the first thing I ever invented with a team of mine called Try.net, which is the ability to write C# code in the browser, and we use Blazor WASM in order to do that. The next thing I built was the .NET Interactive Multi-Language Notebook, which is the ability to write, if you're familiar with Jupyter, you can write .NET code in a notebook right now. But we have the additional advantage that you can write C#, F#, PowerShell, JavaScript, SQL, HTML, Custo, soon Python, and R in a single notebook. And you can actually share a variable from one language to the other. So if you ever want to do something on that, let me know. I'd be happy to come in and talk about that. And then the next thing I was given to tackle was ASP.NET. And how do we make ASP.NET a little bit less daunting when people are trying to build some basic or to the point applications? And the first thing was API. So if you think about building an API, you think about just returning an endpoint, right? Or just returning a route and doing the HTTP methods and it just working with as low ceremony as possible. Now, with .NET, that isn't quite this case. In .NET, traditionally in .NET, web APIs were built with a lot more structure. And this is because our entire ecosystem was built for the enterprise, right? Like a lot of languages that are 20 plus years old, they were built thinking about the enterprise scenario before we thought about everybody in the world having access and the ability to build an application. We've reached a world where anybody, given whether you have a CS degree or not, whether you're self-taught, whether you're a person who's just dabbling, you should be able to build an application in any language. And minimal APIs is our first attempt into this space. And the reason I was picked for this is that I focus on minimalism. And the idea is that we're building a platform that grows with you. So
this is my opportunity to play the beginner programmer. At least, more or less, that's what I am after not seeing any .NET code for years. I do have a lot of like I have a lot of things to compare to, and I think that will provide good feedback. And we were both talking about this before, like having someone else try your thing for the first time is a perspective that you no longer have because you've worked on it, you've used it. So having that like raw feedback from something as they try something out is the best feedback oftentimes that you can ever get. So I'm excited to kind of play the naive developer here and try this out.
Yeah, I'm really excited, but as I told you, I'm usually not as nervous, but I am terrified right now because, like, as I was saying, that even though like I'm building this, I don't consider myself an ASP.NET developer, right? I'm more of just like, I worked in the data science and like education space for a long time in tooling. So this is going to be very eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
To see you do this. Like right now, like you might see me look on the side because my entire team is nervous right now. They're all like, what's going to happen? But let's give it a try, right?
Yeah.
So you installed the version of the .NET SDK, .NET 6 RC1.
Yes. And let me,
Okay.
I'm going to shift my screens around. So it's going to look like I'm not looking at you as much anymore, but I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that we can see it. And Maria, I got to give you a couple of heads up. I've got a few interactions for chat commands. One of the things that people can do is send this to the screen. There we go. Is they can control my theme inside of VS Code. So the color theme, and there's one really, really bad one, if you've ever seen or heard of this, is hot dog theme. So we may get blasted by the hot dog theme. You'll see it if we see it. The other thing that people can do is make me do push-ups. So there's like 2,000 points you get points by watching, and then they can accumulate. If they get 2,000, they can make me do push-ups. So about midway through, I expect someone to make me take a break and do push-ups. So just so you know, those are a couple of things we might see along the way. But
so I should be prepared for slightly odd interactions.
Yes, a few fun different interactions. That's right.
Okay, absolutely. And I also wanted to add on is that I might be like telling you to go to certain links throughout the process. So what I did do, because I like to set people up, is I did create just a repository with a list of resources for people. So it just has a bunch of links in it. So I will just do that. I will put it in the chat in Teams as well. So people have access to it. So what you're looking at right now, okay.
See if there we go, cool.
Yes, that's a resource. So before we get into the doc, I would like to just see your initial impressions on when you build your very first simple Hello World application in .NET. So if you don't mind opening the terminal for me, we'll just make sure that you have the right version. So if you can just do .NET -- version. Oh yeah, list is fine. Yeah, you do remember some things.
No, I just did this beforehand.
Oh, okay.
When I was trying to install the right version, that's what I was playing around with. So I did some basic things.
And I love how you have a folder called delete me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just for stuff that's like for testing, throw it out there. And then when I need to clear up some space on my machine, if I need to, I know that those are projects that are not like serious ones that I could just throw away. Wes Boss gave that tip. I'm sure people in here know Wes Boss. Yeah, it's a handy one. Yeah.
I am definitely going to use it. So what I do want you to do is let's go back one stop over to a new folder. We're going to create a brand new. Yeah. Okay. And then I'm going to give you your in the command line.
Okay. And that will be the name of the folder that it will create as well.
That will be the name of the folder. Like I feel like we could have called it something else that would resonate more with people, like -N to stand for new or name.
Name, yeah.
But -O is what was landed on. So just hit enter for that.
Yep. And by the way, a couple of shout outs for people that are hanging out. Chillaxathor said slowly sneaks in and sits. Like I can picture what conferences used to be, where like you're a few minutes late and you sneak into the back and sit down really quietly. Anyway, Chillaxathor says hello to both of us. What's up, Chillaxathor? And Brandon Roberts is hanging out in the chat. I will be streaming with Brandon Roberts on Monday. Brandon, if you have if you have a link to that, throw that in the chat for people to find as well.
Perfect.
And should I go ahead and open that directory in VS Code?
Yeah, open that directory in VS Code.
By the way, the -R flag is a lifesaver in the code command. -R will reuse the same window that I'm in, so it won't open up a new window of VS Code. It will open it in the same one. Yes.
Okay, so like, let me just write a note of that, because I'm just like, how do I work here? And I do not know that that's a thing.
Yeah, I had to go and look it up specifically one day because it was driving me crazy. I would open a new project and close the previous one. Another thing, I don't know, like I'm assuming this is not a problem, but I will be joining the VS Code live stream of some sort. Haven't got any details, but I got invited to do that. So I will hang out and talk about like my favorite tips and tricks and stuff in VS Code, which I'm looking forward to.
I do use your channel to learn about tips and tricks to VS Code, actually. Like, I love your videos. I'm like, please, and you have this thing of like, please use this trick. So you're relatively, like, I don't know if you remember old ASP.NET. Sorry, let me not say old, but more structured ASP.NET. You would typically have a startup.cs file in there. You would have a bunch of different files in there just to run an application. So just click on program.cs. So look at, like, just absorb this for a moment and tell me what you think.
So most of my comparisons will come from Express, like thinking about like what's the easiest way that I've created an endpoint or created an API. Express and Node is usually the way that goes. So this very much looks exactly like that. Did you notice the change, by the way? That was from a command inside of.
I like that.
So and they will do this until they get the hot dog theme. You'll get to see that at some point, I'm sure, and you'll see how obnoxious it is. So yeah, this is almost the exact same thing as Express, where you end up getting the app, and here you do your endpoints. In Express, it would be like app.get instead of map.get.
Yeah.
And same exact parameters here, where you'd have your path as the first parameter, and then the actual handler function. Which this is interesting. Like I again haven't touched and wasn't that technical, honestly, with C# back in the day, but this is like our JavaScript, or like what I'm familiar with in JavaScript syntax with arrow functions. I'm assuming this does an implicit return, which is also interesting because that means it must be doing automatic conversion of this to attach this to, like, it's actually interesting because in Express you would have like, oh, not that. I don't know what that was. Rec and res, the request and response objects. And then you have to do like a res.send. So I'm wondering if we stubbed out this into a full function like this, would what we just did basically look like this? Like that's what it's doing with the implicit return?
That's what it is doing. And can we just give it a try and see if that runs?
Yeah.
Because I don't see any errors.
Oh, and by the way, I should shout this out too. I installed the C#
extension.
Yeah, so this is from Microsoft, powered by OmniSharp.
Yeah.
And this is the one I found in the doc. So I've got this installed for any .NET support inside of VS Code.
Okay. So let's just do a .NET run.
.NET run. One thing I didn't see, which I assume it has a default, I don't see a port that it's going to run at. So I assume it probably has a default of 3000 or something like that.
So it has a default. So the default, it's not a default. I think we changed it so it's random. So the default used to be 5000, but now it runs a random number every single time. Are you getting?
I assume this is something associated with the .NET stuff, right?
I have never seen that before.
I'll give it access, and we'll see if I lose my computer.
Yeah. So if we do, I'm sorry in advance, and we will figure out how to make it better for you. So yeah, it's a random generated port every single time, because I was running this earlier, and it gave me 7192. So if you take the first one, let's see if it does return a hello world. You can use HTTP or HTTPS. Let's just be. Can
you use HTTPS localhost?
Yeah.
I didn't know you could do that. Okay. Let's see. All right, let's just paste this in here. What we should get back is just the string of hello world. It also, just for both of our benefits, it says in here that a prompt might ask for permission. So I think we can, I think what I need to do is add this as always allow. And
let's refresh that. Oh.
Can I do HTTP?
You'd have to change the port because there's a different port for HTTP and HTTPS.
Oh, there is a, okay, gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So you may have, well, I don't know.
If you click advanced, what does it do?
Do I get a, yeah, let's go ahead.
Proceed.
I trust it. I wrote this code. There we go.
You wrote this code, and all I can say is that it's Microsoft, so you can trust us.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, let's just say our security does not joke. But initial impressions is that I liked the fact that you were able to just easily transition into the way you'd expect this, right? In Node. And it kind of worked. Like, it just worked. There wasn't an on-ramp for you to like make it a return.
Yep. And there's no like stubbing out classes, which again, like going back to me learning programming in school, and it was like learning Java, you had to create a class and you had to write a main function and you had to do all these things before you had any idea what classes and functions at the time honestly were. So I think that's one of the benefits of learning in JavaScript and other Python or other languages like Python. I guess PHP is the same, but things that you can just start writing code and see a result. And this feels more familiar in that sense.
Yes, it just feels more familiar. And like, you were able to do this, no need for a controller, no need to put this in a separate class. You just added a route. So how would you, right? How would you add another create a new to-do route? So like, that's what I want us to do. Like, I want us to create a new to-do route.
So assuming we're talking about a get, same sort of thing. And first parameter would be the route. So let's say this is to-dos. Second would be the arrow function. In this case, what do I have? Too many characters. And oh, I'm not in JavaScript world anymore. You cannot use single quotes.
Yes. Nope. Welcome to C# land.
Semicolons.
Yep. You have to have a semicolon. Like we like that additional drama. That's over right. Here. So
what is that? Turn. So these are the to-dos. Semicolon. Usually like Prettier will autocomplete my semicolons and stuff. So I like usually don't write them and then just save and then inform me after. So it's kind of interesting to have to do that myself.
So that's going to return a to-do, right? So if you go /to-do, to-dos, it should give you the results of these are to-dos. Now we could, if you want to refresh your page and like make sure it works.
Yep. Will the server handle this automatically? Like, is it live reloading as I save code? So
hot reload?
Yes.
No.
I probably need to restart it.
Start. Yep. That's like a VS Code. Like, it doesn't work. That's just going to show that hot reload does not work in VS Code.
Okay. And that would
if I was,
that would be a huge one. So the NodeMon package for Node, you can install that like npm-g, a global package, and then run NodeMon instead of Node, and it will be able to get it the auto reload stuff.
And that's such a different thing where in Node everything is just so packaged, so you always get what you need when you need it. While in .NET, it's like, and in this ecosystem, it's just like, here's everything that you have, and then and then you do add packages. Like if you wanted to add like a database where you can store your backend, like you have to add EF and you have to add the provider, so it can get a little bit more complicated. But we can also do, this is not the right way to do this, but what I want to do is that I want us to create a route that actually returns a list of items. So what we're going to do is let's create a new route a map get, and then what we'll do is have it to do items and call it to do items.
Good. Can't use single quotes to do items.
Okay. And then you can say, and then what we're going to do is instead of return, we're going to have like new, and we're going to create a list. New. Oh.
I'm getting all sorts of intelligent stuff.
Yeah, so we don't even need to write list. We're just going to write new, and then we're going to do curly braces. We're back in curly braces land.
Okay.
Right? And then you are going to,
like,
then you're going to have item. We're going to like create an item. So item, which is going to be a variable. So you can just have item. Right? Oh, I can see like, sorry, like the C# in me is like, like that needs to be capital I.
Well, I'm not sure honestly what I'm doing yet. So
okay.
So then, walk me through this, and then I'll probably after we write it, it will register what we're actually doing.
Okay, so you're gonna create an item and just give it a value. So item equals do a stream, and then it's a string. Do a stream. Okay. Did I say do a string or do a stream?
I'm not sure. Which one did you mean?
Okay, we're creating a to-do list, and we're gonna have an item. So let's just put an item of water the plants.
As a string?
Mm-hmm.
Like this. By the way, David Pine is in the chat, who's a .NET. I think maybe you're making this up, David. I think you're in Microsoft MVP.
Yes. No, he's in Microsoft.
Or no,
now.
He's a Microsoft employee now. Yes, that's right.
Yep.
Was an MVP. Yeah. So David, how's it going? Good to talk to you kind of in chat. Maybe one day we'll see each other in person. Okay. So
and then we're gonna add another item of complete. So just comma complete. Capital.
Yeah.
Boolean? And this will, Boolean, but we'll just put it into a string of false. That should work. Yeah, do that. Perfect. So let's save that.
Is this, what am I
needs to be in quotes. So we need to have, you're missing a bracket. So
around
get to-dos. Let me put this on full screen so I can see it better.
Yeah, this syntax I feel like is completely new for me. Is it so? This is creating a new object. Is that what
creating a new object
and that object has the two properties of item and complete?
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
why is it?
David is saying just a Boolean of false instead of the string.
No, that entire line is having issues. Only assign an increment weight.
Objects use as a statement. Only assignment call. So do I need to assign this to something or something equals?
Probably. Let's see. Okay. There's that's something I could do in Visual Studio. Create like an anonymous list like this. Okay, let's run this.
Should I return that thing too?
You don't have to. Oh yes, you do. You do. You have to return something. Return something. I was trying to make it into smaller lines of code. So.
Oh, I could probably just return directly then. Like I don't need to assign it if I'm returning it.
Yeah.
And then I need to restart the. Oh, and David's got a point in the chat too. Like if we did the implicit return, we could just get rid of the function brackets and ignore the return keyword. I didn't know if we were going to be adding other stuff in the function, so I didn't do implicit return. But yeah, we definitely could do that.
That is it.
Let's see. Okay, so this one is to do items. Is that what we called it? That should just return us an object. Cool. Okay.
There we go. All right. So it's kind of easy to do stuff like this, right? We try to make it as simple as possible. So what we're going to do now is that you and I are going to go through the docs, and I would love to get your raw feedback as we do this tutorial together. So if you go over to these docs, I think I pasted a link earlier, minimal, yes, that one. Cool. So let's take a moment here and just go through what minimal APIs is. So minimal APIs is like an API that's written in C#. We hope in the future we'll also be able to do it in F# as well. At our core, minimal APIs is minimalism first, right? So we wanted you to get up and running in a few lines as possible. And we're able to do these with things because we have global usings. Like, you know, so there weren't any usings at the top of the file. Like, remember that from deep C# land, it's like everything needs to be pulled in using systems, using this. They're just implicitly there by default. The next thing as well is like top level statement. So being able to just do an app.mapGet without putting it into some sort of function.
Into a class.
That's into a class, we're able to do that, right? And lambdas, right? Lambdas is something that has been in C# for a while, but I don't think it has been so heavily used. So these are all things that allow us to, just like in 4 lines of code, you're able to return an endpoint. And I also mentioned that, you know, it's bros with you, right? So the whole idea here is that if you need to transition into something more structured, like putting your classes into controllers, you can, because we already do that with web APIs and MVC. So we actually are standing on the shoulder of giants that allows us to pull in those kind of references. And another thing is that I felt funny writing this statement that we're incredibly fast. It felt like such a marketing thing to say, but we are pretty fast. We have 4 million requests per second for minimal APIs, which is a pretty healthy performance. We worked really hard on that. So as I said, this is incomplete. It's not the best. And there's some buzzwords at the bottom, like it's great for microservices. So we've heard that a lot from our existing customers. As I mentioned, we stand on the shoulder of an entire C# ecosystem, right? And then also we've made routing as low ceremony as possible. So, you know, you and I were talking about all this boilerplate code that comes in templates, and you're just like, what do you do? Right? And we're just like, just get to the code. So the fact that you're able to look at this, like, oh, I'm familiar with Express, and this feels Express-like. Yeah. I want to see if there are any comments or questions in the chat before I go on rambling.
We had Avnish had one question about would you / I think more appropriately is like, could you use .NET with Next.js? And my response was, you absolutely could. Like, you could pair Next.js with any sort of backend API that you want, written in any language and framework. Next.js has like API endpoints as serverless functions kind of built into the framework. So some people would do like their backend in those serverless functions. Some people would create a completely separate API. And the benefits of that is like, maybe you're more comfortable building a benefit or building an API with a different language framework, something like this. And then people like to have complete separation in terms of dependencies between front end and back end, so that if they needed to reuse the backend APIs for other front end applications, they're not tied to just Next.js. So that would be one of the benefits of using something other than those serverless functions, API endpoints, and Next is having the separate API itself.
So is Next.js is it like a SPA front end? What is it?
It's built on top of React. So React by itself is a SPA. And then what Next.js does is it has basically the equivalent of kind of built-in API endpoints as they get hosted as serverless functions. So you can define, like, basically you would, in a individual file, you'd write this, and then you'd have whatever you want that endpoint to do. And it's based on file-based routing. So if you create a file at /API/test.js, it will host that as an endpoint of /API/test. So you have basically the ability to build a full stack application and do server-side rendering, statically generated content, and regular stuff that you would do with React, all kind of in one.
Oh, nice.
It's pretty sweet. I talk a lot about Next.js, and I love it.
Okay. I need to look that up. Cool. Okay. So actually, like the person who mentioned about, like, can you attach this to other things? If you click on samples, just open it in a new tab just to walk through what we are dealing with in this doc. So I started, and then I jumped on this call just before, is I'm beginning to build out these samples, which is like, how do you use minimal APIs with React? So if you click on the React one, and as I said, just started, I actually, like, if you look at my last comment, it's like
3 hours ago, 2 hours ago.
It's like marking my place, which is basically, this is where I stopped.
Yeah.
But the goal, if you scroll down, this is a React application. It's all built in React. It's a to-do app. And what I'm planning to do throughout this tutorial, which I'm building up, is building a back-end component to this using minimal APIs. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea is that you'll be able to build this entire minimal API back-end service for a to-do app in a single file. And I have a sample somewhere in my machine. I'll have it done by the end of the day if I don't have a stupid amount of meetings. It will be about less than 70 lines of code to do this in C#, probably a lot less than that, to actually build this entire thing. It'll be a little bit more if I decide to add things like open API support and stuff like that. But I will have samples like that. And if anyone wants to contribute a Next.js frontend or a Vue frontend that I just plug into, please let me know. I am not the greatest React JavaScript dev, so I would welcome somebody else's experiences here. So if we go back to the docs, and I'll just kind of walk you through what I built this doc out to be with David. David has been a great contributor on this, as well as David Fowler and my boss, Glenn.
Yeah. Are you and David on the same team?
David, different teams. So David is on the content team. So he writes this amazing content. He's pretty amazing. And honestly, his insight on this has been eye-opening because he thinks about writing content for people every single day. So shout out to David for all that. Yeah. And then also David Fowler, who is the architect behind all of this, and my boss, Glenn, who wrote the quick starts. I'm
almost positive I know who David Fowler is.
Yeah, so David Fowler, he's like the partner architect for the whole of .NET. He made .NET cross-platform. I think he built like NuGet and SignalR. Yeah, and he's been working on this journey. Actually, the interesting thing about this journey is that it started from a tweet where someone said building everything in .NET, ASP.NET is so much harder. Mm-hmm. And David was like, challenge accepted. And then he came in. I told him, I've been telling you this since I joined the team. Our stack is hard. So if you head over to the quick starts, just to give you a quick run of the docs. So the quick starts right now, as I said, this is a work in process. If you go to minimal server 8, that one. And this is all, server app. And this is all built using Vue.js. VuePress. So I also try to go outside my comfort zone. But this is basically the idea of this entire doc is that it shows you what you get with minimal APIs, how to run your application, what's happening on every single line of code. How do you host your application? How do you start rendering HTML? How do you access data? How do you do error handling? So we built this doc as a mini insight into what minimal APIs are without having to read a novel, which is kind of expected in some of our existing documentation. This is supposed to be quick insights.
Sweet. Cool.
Yeah.
There's a comment from Zamthor, who's in the chat, who is Miguel, who I think is a pretty big .NET person. He was one of the TAs for the last round of a boot camp that I taught.
Okay.
And I think is really big in the .NET community. Can you tell me what exactly is Blazor? So Blazor is like a rendering engine, like for server-side rendering of pages in the .NET ecosystem?
Blazor or Razor?
Blazor. And I don't know the difference between those two.
Perfect. So Razor is a syntax. So it's like a mixture of C# and HTML. So that is going to be the way we render render from the server. Now, Blazor is the SPAR equivalent for the .NET ecosystem, right? So the same way you have Angular and React and Svelte, Blazor is a C# version of that. It's a way to build SPAR applications using C#. Because I was going to say traditionally, because I was like, now I'm beginning to sound like this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
I'm going to sound like that old, that person. Yeah. So, but typically when .NET developers wanted to build a front-end component, like a SPA front-end for their application, they were using Angular or React. So what we decided to do was also create an opportunity for them to do this in C#, right? Because we got that feedback that I just want to build a Spark application using C#, and that's what Blazor is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Cool. Awesome.
And I think
heard people talk a lot about it, like positively, but I've never specifically known what it was.
Yeah. And as David said, like Blazor is the first ever SPA framework from Microsoft. And hopefully, like David, I'm sorry, I kind of made you my TA in this video. In the thing, you can please like drop a link to the Blazor docs that you like the most, so people can go have a look. And I'll also make sure I'll add it to the resource page as well. And we'll have samples as well on how to use Blazor with a SPA application as well.
Sweet. Cool.
Yeah, Blazor is pretty cool. And if you ever want someone from Blazor, Dan Roth would be more than happy to come and talk about Blazor. He created it with Steve Sanderson.
Sweet.
Okay. Cool.
Xanthor, who's Miguel, said he built a Pokedex, which that's always my demo of choice with Blazor, which is super cool. And then we just had Tros Codes just joined. He's got an amazing Twitch channel that people should go and follow if you don't already. But welcome, Alex. And he said .NET interesting, or he said, oh cool, never tried .NET. And more or less, I'm in the same boat, at least for this new stuff.
No, I think a lot of people are in the same boat for this new stuff, but I'm hoping this new stuff kind of gets people thinking about like using a .NET application. So let's go over to the tutorial and just like checking, like how long do we have for this stretch?
It's really up to you. I've got no other meeting coming up, so I've got time. Okay.
I have 15 minutes, but I want to use it because it's going to be epic.
Okay.
So now, as you can see, creative stage, please don't judge me. As I said, this is a work in process. But let's go over to getting started. By the way, I love ViewPress. It is just so easy to use. So what we went through here was what you just did, right? Was like creating the new application. You can also use this in Visual Studio with File New Project. How to run the application. I use .NET Watch Run, and that's like npm run dev run or run dev. Do I have that right?
Run dev. Yeah. Does this not do a live restart? Is that what that is? The watch? Usually watch commands are doing live restarts.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can do it that way as well. I should have done that. I don't, and there it is in docs that I wrote to myself. Okay. So like it goes through the process, how to run this application. When you look at these screenshots, they're actually older. So if you look at the screenshot in Visual Studio, you'll notice that I'm not using global usings yet because we hadn't implemented it. That came in RC in Preview 7, which was as you can see, I was lazy and I didn't update the GIFs because GIFs are a thing to make. But this is what your code looks like. We looked at this code. We go over how to add a new route as well, which I butchered at explaining to you. And throughout the sprinkling of this doc, it shows you how it's going to return JSON that looks at this. And what I've tried to do with this documentation is have checklists, points at each point, like so the person will know what they've achieved per section. So by this section, you've created a new route, and you've had this introduction to the HTTP request method of app-get or get, as you know. Another one, and this is where it got a little bit tricky for me. I was wondering if this is the best way to introduce interactive documentation to people for docs, and I used Swagger. And just for context, you introduced me to Swagger when we were in
Microsoft? Really?
The first time I ever heard of Swagger, it was from you.
I wonder, I can't even remember where I learned about it. It's kind of wild because I look back at that time and I was not technical at all. Like I really didn't understand things coming out of my computer science degree that I should have. And so I'm surprised if I knew anything at that time.
You introduced me to Swagger. I think we all feel like that, because we're not really taught how to apply our computer science degrees until you go into the workforce, and you're just like, oh, that the law of demand actually mattered, and you're just like, oh, it does. And like these are things that just flew past us. But like in this experience, what this is showing you is how to add Swagger UI into your middleware. So in .NET, we have the concept, like you probably all have it, of you have your app builder and you have your build services, right? And the thing that begins to trip people up is that you have to configure your services like, hey, I need you to use OpenAPI, and then you need to call it into your app, and this is where you add the Swagger UI. Do you do something similar in Node, or it's just
for middleware and Node? It would be more. You don't have to register something as a service, and this is where like Angular is an amazing framework, but onboarding onto Angular as a new framework is a little bit more intense because you have these concepts of components, services, and there's like classes and TypeScript on top of it. So it's not the easiest way from just a JavaScript developer's perspective to start building apps. So the idea of adding something to a service is not quite the way that would be in Node. You would typically like whatever the thing is, you would say this thing. Where is this IntelliSense coming from? It's going to come from some package. There's other IntelliSense. Wow, I think
it's coming from C#.
Yeah, it's that I'm not used to. And then you could say your app.use and give it that thing, FSD. So there's not really any registering. It's just grabbing that package, whatever that thing is. Maybe there's a configuration specifically for that package, but then you just throw it into a use function, and Express will handle that as middleware. The additional thing that you could do is throw in an extra parameter in here and have a piece of middleware that runs only on this route, if that makes sense. So app.use with the middleware itself will run that middleware before every endpoint. If you do it as a middle parameter for your route definition, it will run the middleware just on that route. So if you're doing like some are protected routes, some are not, then you throw the middleware into the ones that specifically need to be protected.
Oh, okay. So that's how you'd configure your dependency injection, right? Is that how you handle it?
Yeah,
okay.
and it's so like the concept of dependency injection is really not, at least not actively present in the Express world. Something like Next.js is a Node, a version of a Node backend that's more similar to Angular and does take advantage of like dependency injection and version control, all that kind of stuff.
Because that catches me up all the time, like configuring the services. So if I'm writing an application in minimal APIs and I'm not using a tutorial and I'm doing it on my own, I always forget to configure my services. Always. And the thing that happens is that you get this random error message that doesn't quite make sense, right? It just says, doesn't give you any details. It's just like it ran. So one of the things that we are doing is we want to write an analyzer that actually goes through your code and says, hey, you need to configure your services. So like a friendlier reminder on how to add your services. But like I like the idea of being able to like create a route as protected, like to specify it to a particular route and how that just makes sense to people. Like if you wanted to protect one that goes to a specific login page, or like it just feels more intuitive.
It's really, once you understand Express middleware, like it's kind of hard to get to this understanding, but then eventually it comes like beautifully simplistic. And Swarlo has a good point in here that the middleware, they're just functions in Express. So you're basically like giving the router a function to call. When you use app.use, you're just giving it an extra function that it should call before it then calls the actual endpoint. And the same thing inside of, if you were to define it in here, that it's just giving another function to call before it actually triggers the official handler here. I might be missing something. So we have a hard stop, or Maria has a hard stop in a few minutes. So for push-ups, I'll do those after to make sure we get the rest of our minutes in.
So I just realized, like David, like I told you that some people are going to come troll, right? So David Fowler is not trolling, but he's giving advice. But he said it is the same in .NET. It's a little bit more hidden in .NET because we hide the functions in other functions that expose the APIs through configuration. So like the thing about .NET as well is that because it's like it's 20 years, right? It's so many years of development. So there are all these hidden functions that even I don't see. But if you look under the hood, which you can if you're in Visual Studio, would actually be able to see definition and then see what makes this stuff up. Okay, cool. Let's go back to the docs and I just like show you some. Were you able to see that? Oh, it does work.
Inside of, if you do command and then click on the function, you can get to the docs. David's saying, can I zoom in on the browser? You know if that's better.
It is. So
yeah, go ahead.
Like, yeah, so this is like the kind of feedback I also wanted to check with you as a person, like you're an educator, you are in the space, is like, we had this idea of having a different way to configure Swagger UI because, as I said, like being able to configure the build services and then use it in app use, people were getting confused. So if you scroll down a little, this isn't working yet, but I would love people's feedback because we're building a minimal API template. If you just continue to scroll, there's the option where we have Swagger UI built into the template by default. So you wouldn't even see the code. What would happen is you would run your application, and if you go to /docs, it would actually give you this alternative way to just interact with your API without having to configure or add some sort of UI ahead of it.
That's cool. I was just thinking, like, if you took a config object, I'm doing this in JavaScript, but if you did like include Swagger and set that to true, then maybe you could have some sort of like config property to determine whether or not they want it to be included when they create their app.
Yeah, we could also do it at, I would actually prefer it in that way because I said another thing that we can do, .NET is all about customization at the beginning. So if you're in Visual Studio, you could do a checkbox that says include Swagger. If you are in the in the UI, in the command line, you could add a parameter like a flag on top of it and say include Swagger, right? And then the whole thing is like, where do you put it in the code? But that's okay. Software engineers, we should figure that out. It's up to us to figure out the solution. So if you just went over to build, what I go over in this section is I talk about CRUD. And I talk about, I feel like if you're going to teach anyone how to do anything, please teach them how to do a CRUD application because that's how we figure out how everything works together. But in here, we create a data model. We're introduced into entity frameworks. And just for people, entity frameworks is our ORM within .NET. And here I'm using an in-memory database. The reason why I'm using an in-memory database is I just don't want us to say, hey, use SQL Server or SQLite or Cosmos DB or this, right? It's just saying, hey, your data doesn't need to persist right now. We can worry about those configurations later. And this is a section where people learn about map get, map put, post, like all the different HTTP methods, the concept of DB context as well. And what here is new to you? Entity frameworks.
Yeah, I've never used entity frameworks, but it's pretty I did spend a lot of time in Java Spring Boot world. So in that sense, it's pretty straightforward. This is probably, once you get an instance of this class, I'm assuming it gives you functions that you call for your CRUD operations. And they may even have cool thing in Spring Boot ORMs. You could name a function. If you said name a function like find item by username, just the name of that function. If you create an alias for that function or a definition, but not the implementation of it, it would actually do that for you because it would do a find and then it would basically create a where SQL clause based on those properties that you included in the name of the function. But I assume this probably does the same type of thing.
It does.
Yep. Cool.
So these are, this is adding a database. I wanted people to focus on just understanding how to do the different HTTP requests without having to think about a database. And if you click on the database section, I introduced SQLite as a database. If there is a specific database provider that you think people would prefer, just let me know. I'm happy to try out anything. Yep. But I would love to know, for you as a non-.NET person, as you as a non-C# person, what are some of the scenarios? MongoDB is a big one. That you would like to see covered so you could feel that you could build something build a backend service to a Next.js application or a React or an Angular using minimal APIs.
Yeah, so you mentioned building a CRUD application, especially the to-do thing. To-do apps get a little bit of a bad reputation just because they've been done so many times, but they're actually exactly the perfect demo for learning anything new. And it could be something else, but even if you call it like grocery list, it's the exact same thing, right? It's just a different name of what the items are. So hitting those CRUD endpoints, which I think like walking through here is probably what it's about to get into. Here's the post for to-dos. It takes in just regular function parameters. That's kind of neat because I feel like these are more just regular functions than they are specifically endpoint functions, because you're not even having like in Express and most things I work with, you'd have to parse the item to get it out. Like you'd have to go into rec.body and grab the body and convert it to the object that you're looking for. So having your strong typing in here for what these are. Actually, this is probably, I'm sure this is just dependency injection where it's giving the database. And then this is the thing that's actually coming in the post body. That's pretty clean. And like the Spring Boot stuff would get into that too, where you just give it a type. But they had even more annotations for things on top of this. So yeah, and David is saying parsed implicitly on your behalf from the back end. Yeah, okay. So I would expect all of that. The big question that a lot of people have when they learn a backend and API endpoints is then specifically with a front end framework, how do you interact with a front end framework? And this is not quite clear for a lot of people. So typically what this becomes is you have like your raw or your this endpoint would be an endpoint that returns a public directory. So it will return like an HTML file out of a public directory. And then you have this like, you have to go through the React build process to get that index HTML and host it inside of that public directory that your root index would serve. So tying, and I think you already have this based on what you said before, but tying in like how does a .NET backend actually serve a React application? And then there's little more details on like best practices of like, do you have these be two separate apps and maybe the React is hosted on its own? It doesn't have to be hosted within the .NET app, or the opposite of that is .NET app actually hosting the built React application. And so you could have two separate projects, a mono repo, two separate deployments, one deployment. Options and best practices around that would be the next thing I would be looking for, and a question that I've seen people have a lot. Also, really funny comment from David. I don't know if you're trying to be funny. David says the React is painful, that's the world I live in. I spend almost all of my time in React and Node, so I love it. But
just to let you know, that's David Fowler. He's trolling you. Like he's trolling you right now.
I'm all about it. All about it.
But I would love to be back anytime you would have me. Maybe we could bring Fowler in and have him come and talk about some of the things that we do in minimal APIs. But I just, like, more than anything, I just really enjoyed seeing you again, James.
I know, right? Yes, it's fun. I don't know if I told you, but I hung out with Mary Baker on the stream.
She told me. Yeah. She told me that she's like, oh, James has this great stream thing, and she switched over to tech. Like, just for reference, Mary, James, and I all joined Microsoft around the same time. We were the young people, and now we're the old ones. Yeah. Or as they call us, geriatric millennials or something?
Whatever it is.
Or like whatever.
How the times have changed.
Yeah, David is saying now you're a C# developer, but like we'd love, like I want to learn more about Auth0. I would love to like do something where we try to like put some auth with Auth0 within minimal APIs as well, because that's been another thing: authorization, validation. How do I connect to my existing applications? How do I just add .NET this as a microservices? But yeah, I am down any single time you will have me. The audience has been lovely. Thank you for creating such an inclusive community. And thank you for the raw feedback. And any questions, tweet me. Like, let's continue to have this conversation in public about minimal APIs.
Absolutely. Let me do one thing for people in case they have follow-up questions. I've got a guest command that hopefully will work. Yeah, there we go. So there's Maria's Twitter handle if you want to follow her and ask her questions on Twitter. We should totally do like a clickbaity like React versus or like Express versus .NET and just like really get into it and draw the crowd and have the conversation. Yeah,
we should do a versus. Like what's like there's that thing BET does where it's like Brandy versus Monica.
Yes.
But like, who are those people? They are
Now-
huge R&B artists.
Now you just dated. Now you just dated us. Yep.
Let's do something like I was going to say somebody else. I was like, that's also old.
Mhm.
I don't know the young.
I don't know who the
I don't know the
kids
young
are
people.
listening to these
I don't
days.
know Billie Eilish.
Yeah. Xanthor, who's Miguel. Miguel, you should definitely, especially being in the .NET ecosystem, you should follow both Davids and Maria. And it would be, I think these are the kind of people that would be great to know in the .NET
And we'll follow,
ecosystem.
and I will follow you back.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yes.
Anyway, I know you've got to go somewhere, but I had fun as well. So we'll probably do some sort of follow up. But it's good to hang out with you. I will hang on for everybody else. I think they've been like waiting to make me do push-ups. I'll hang on.
Okay.
Yes. But to get out, you can just close the tab that you're on. But thanks again for hanging out and showing me this. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, James. Bye.
See you, Maria.